Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham, and we're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, here's a look at the latest headlines. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says he's available for a call with President Donald Trump, but only on Canada's terms, as tensions grow between the two neighbors. India reportedly considers cutting tariffs on over half of U.S. imports worth around $23 billion. The move aims to avoid President Trump's reciprocal tariffs starting April 2nd. The Sudanese army launches an airstrike on a market in the country's western Darfur region, reportedly killing hundreds of people. Israeli airstrikes hit two military bases in southern Syria, killing at least 5 people, a day after the European Union warned such attacks could worsen the situation. And a raging wildfire in southwestern Japan destroys over 500 acres of land and forces more than 1,000 residents to flee their homes. We began in the United States in what can only be described as one of the nation's most stunning intelligence leaks. President Donald Trump's top office officials mistakenly disclosed highly sensitive war plans in a group chat that included a journalist. According to The Atlantic's editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg, on March 11th, he received a connection request from a user identified as Mike Waltz on the messaging app Signal. 2 days later, the reporter was added to a group chat named the Houthi PC Small Group. The group had 18 members, including Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Goldberg said he witnessed a shocking policy debate on March 14th with the group members discussing military strikes on the Houthis in Yemen. Now, in his bombshell report, Goldberg added that on March 15th, Secretary Hegseth shared an explicit document in the group which included information about targets, weapons, and attack sequencing. Needless to say, Goldberg almost couldn't believe that the text chain was actually real. However, 2 hours later, when bombs dropped on Yemen and members celebrated in the chat, Goldberg concluded that the messages were indeed authentic. Now, the White House has in fact confirmed that top Trump administration officials accidentally included Goldberg in the group chat. However, President Trump said he knew nothing about the leaked chats.
President, your reaction to the story in The Atlantic that said that some of your top cabinet officials and aides had been discussing very sensitive material through Signal and included an Atlantic reporter for that. What is your response to that?
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business. I think it's not much of a magazine, but I know nothing about it. You're saying that they had what?
They were using Signal to coordinate on sensitive materials and
having to do with what? Having to do with what? What were they talking about?
With the Houthis.
The Houthis? You mean the attack on the Houthis? Right. Well, it couldn't have been very effective because the attack was very effective. I can tell you that. I don't know anything about it. You're telling me about it for the first time. Anybody else?
Meanwhile, Pentagon Chief Hegseth tried to dodge the question about him mistakenly leaking classified documents.
Why were those details shared on Signal, and how did you learn that a journalist was privy to the targets, the types of weapons used?
I've heard I was characterized. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Now, reports say the stunning leak has now triggered furious discussion inside the White House about National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. While some want him out of the administration, others think his possible resignation depends on how President Trump personally feels about the matter. The shocking revelation also puts Vice President Vance in a difficult position, as his text pointedly expressed doubts about the strikes in Yemen. The security breach has also provoked outrage among Democrats, with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer calling for an investigation. And now, with criticism mounting against the mishandling of America's top secret war plans, it remains to be seen how, in fact, President Donald Trump navigates through his administration's latest debacle. And now moving to South America, where tensions between the United States and Venezuela have escalated once again. A flight carrying nearly 200 Venezuelans deported from the United States landed at Simón Bolívar International Airport near Caracas on Monday. This after the U.S. suspended deportation flights weeks ago when the Trump administration revoked a key license allowing Venezuela to export oil to the United States. But despite strained relations, both governments reached an agreement over the weekend to resume these flights.
We have experienced many psychological, emotional, and physical traumas, mistreatment in the conditions in which we were held in the facilities, how we were transferred, and how we were treated in terms of health. They violated our rights. Many of those here were physically assaulted.
Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro welcomed the returnees, describing the flights as a way to rescue and free migrants from U.S. prisons. Maduro also hit back at President Trump's announcement of imposing tariffs on all imports from any country that buys oil or gas from Venezuela.
Yesterday's sanctions, we defeated them, and those to come we will also defeat them with work, inventive creation, love, and patriotism. 1, 2, 3. Venezuela is already making, by the most strict international standards, the gold bullions for its national and international reserve, for its development with its own gold.
The Trump administration's latest deportations have sparked controversy, especially his decision last week to send 238 Venezuelans to El Salvador's high-security prison. While U.S. officials claim they were members of the Tren de Aragua gang, their families denied any criminal ties.
I know my son didn't commit any crime. Maybe his mistake was leaving for the United States. They are accusing him of being part of a criminal gang. He is not part of any gangs. My son is a soldier of Christ. My son is not a criminal.
The commander-in-chief's move to deport these migrants has also invited legal challenges. In fact, on Monday, a U.S. appeals court judge criticized the government's use of the 1798 Alien Enemies Act to justify mass deportations. The judge compared the treatment of Venezuelan migrants to how the U.S. handled Nazi prisoners during World War II, now arguing that the deportees had no opportunity to contest the allegations against them.
Nazis got better treatment under the Alien Enemies Act than has happened here. We certainly dispute the Nazi analogy.
Meanwhile, another federal judge has issued a temporary restraining order ordering the halt of further deportations under the Alien Enemies Act. And now the Trump administration is now fighting to overturn that order as well. With legal battles underway and diplomatic tensions rising, the fate of thousands of Venezuelan migrants in the United States remains uncertain. And now, all eyes are on President Trump, who has vowed to carry out the largest deportation in American history. And now moving to Asia, Japan has announced an anti-dumping duty of more than 95% on China's graphite electrode exports. The tariffs, which are aimed at protecting domestic industries, will be imposed for 4 months starting this Saturday. The Japanese tariffs come after the conclusion of a government probe last month. In their interim report, the investigators noted that China was selling graphite electrodes in Japan at unfairly low prices, hurting domestic companies. Graphite electrode is an industrial material primarily used in the manufacturing of electric arc furnace steel. Japan's government launched the probe against China in April of last year following a complaint by 3 Japanese graphite makers. Now the announcement of Japanese tariffs on China coincided with another spat between the two nations. On Monday, Tokyo lodged protests with Beijing after Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi misquoted Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's remarks. Last Saturday, the Chinese Foreign Minister was in Tokyo to improve trilateral ties that also involved South Korea.
The three parties are maintaining communication on restarting the negotiations on the free trade agreement and strive to resume them as soon as possible. The network of East Asian cultural capitals is further expanded.
I expressed my concern over North Korea's nuclear missile activities, exploitation of cryptographic assets, and military cooperation between Russia and North Korea.
Wang Yi paid a visit to Prime Minister Ishiba and claimed the Japanese leader said his country respects the positions of the Chinese side. Yi even stressed that Japan should, quote, fulfill important political commitments on historical issues and the Taiwan question, end quote. However, Japan later said that Prime Minister Ishiba agreed to no such statement. Tokyo also sought the removal of factually incorrect information from China's statement. However, responding to Tokyo's protest, Beijing defended Wang Yi's misquoted statement.
Isn't it normal for countries to respect each other's positions in state-to-state relations? According to my understanding, this important and beneficial meeting and interaction between China and Japan embodies such a spirit. Regarding this meeting, China has issued a relevant readout. You can refer to the relevant questions, and I have already answered them. I would like to re-emphasize that this important and beneficial interaction between China and Japan embodies the spirit of mutual respect.
Notably, Japan has close ties with Taiwan, and it opposes any change to the status quo concerning the self-governing island. But China claims Taiwan as part of its territory under its One China principle and has not ruled out the possibility of using force to take over the island. And now to Russia, where schoolgirls are being offered $1,200 to have babies. In a shocking new policy, the Ural region has become the first to pay pregnant teens with no minimum age limit. Officials call it support, but critics call it reckless. With birth rates collapsing and hundreds of thousands of men lost to war, Russia is scrambling for solutions. From government-funded wedding nights to proposed baby-making breaks at work, the Kremlin is pulling out all the stops. But this is a strategy for survival, or is it a dangerous social experiment? Here's more in our next report.
Russia is racing against time to stop its population from plummeting. The government is now offering schoolgirls a one-time payment of $1,200 to have children. The controversial policy, first introduced in the Ural region, extends an existing incentive for university students. But this time there is no minimum age. A pregnant schoolgirl, no matter how young, can now cash in. The move has triggered shockwaves across Russia. Critics fear the policy will encourage teenage pregnancies, trapping young girls in poverty.
The counterproductive desire to rejuvenate the birth rate in the provinces leads to absurd decisions. We have never seen such idiocy.
But the Ural governor Andrei Klitschkov, the man behind the policy, insists it's about support. He also says over 40 Russian regions are adopting similar programs.
As for my personal attitude to this norm, it must be borne in mind that young girls in such a situation often make controversial decisions. And our task, since this has already happened, is to provide them with support, help save the life of the child and the health of the mother.
It is no secret that Russia is facing a population crisis. Its birth rate has plummeted to 1.5 births per woman, far below the 2.1 needed for stability. War, economic hardship, and social shifts have pushed the country towards a demographic collapse. Hence now, fewer babies are being born, and more people are dying. Russian leader Vladimir Putin has called the crisis a matter of national survival. His government has outlawed child-free lifestyles, banned abortion ads, and even criminalized coercing women into ending pregnancies. Meanwhile, a state-backed reality show, once called Pregnant at 16 to discourage teen pregnancies, has been rebranded as at 16 to celebrate young motherhood under the Kremlin leader's orders. Russian politicians are scrambling for solutions, and it is evident that their ideas have begun to range from desperate to dystopian. One MP suggested state-funded hotel rooms for wedding nights, with couples reimbursed up to $250 for consummation. Another proposed paying for first dates because apparently romance needs government funding. But the strangest idea of all? A ministry of sex. Yes, some politicians believe a government department should oversee reproduction, ensuring Russians are doing their patriotic duty between the sheets. There is even talk of bosses encouraging baby-making breaks during work hours. Now, while politicians drum up absurd policies, the real crisis lies on the battlefield. Since invading Ukraine, Russia has lost up to 900,000 troops, with at least 250,000 killed. According to UK intelligence, some reports claim the death toll is even higher. Russia is throwing money, policies, and propaganda at a problem that won't go away in a blink of the eye. But with young people fleeing, a war still raging, and women being pressured into motherhood, the future looks bleak.
And we conclude today with the brewing bromance between Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Donald Trump. When it comes to flattery, Putin knows not just how to play the game, but how to ace it. And this time, he's upped the stakes with a custom portrait of Donald Trump. The move comes as U.S.-Russia relations continue to evolve after Trump's return to the White House. But is this an olive branch, a strategic move, or just Putin knowing his audience all too well? Our final report gets you all the details.
Vladimir Putin is many things. One of the longest-serving Russian leaders, second only to Joseph Stalin. A global leader, a wartime strategist, and, as it turns out, a man with a flair for extravagant gifting. Over the years, Russia's leader has showered his allies with everything, from unconditional support to a stream of weapons, from luxury cars to even horses. But his latest diplomatic gesture might just take the cake: a personal portrait of the US President Donald Trump. Yes, the Russian president, known for his iron grip on power, has seemingly embraced the art of flattery by commissioning a beautiful portrait of President Trump and gifting it to him. The move is as strategic as it is symbolic, especially considering the turbulent history between Russia and the United States. While Joe Biden spent years keeping Russia at arm's length, Trump has been eager to rekindle the flames of a more cooperative relationship. And what better way to do that than with a little bit of artistic adoration and narcissism? President Trump, a man who's never shied away from admiration or his own reflection, was reportedly clearly touched by the gift. Details about the painting remain scarce, with only Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov describing it as a personal gift. But given Trump's well-documented preference for larger-than-life imagery, it's safe to assume the painting doesn't skimp on grandeur. The timing, however, is just as intriguing as the gift itself. The exchange comes as US and Russian officials engage in diplomatic talks in Saudi Arabia over the war in Ukraine. Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, revealed that the Russian leader had even prayed for Trump following last year's assassination attempt in Pennsylvania. While President Trump has yet to publicly comment on his Russian-made portrait, he's had plenty to say about another depiction of himself, one that was recently removed from the Colorado state capitol. This is after he deemed it truly the worst. The painting, which has been on display since 2019, became the subject of Trump's latest Truth Social rant. He thrashed the artist's work and even appreciated Barack Obama's official portrait. The entire episode raises an amusing yet important question. Is Putin simply playing into Trump's well-known love for self-admiration, or is this an artful diplomatic maneuver? The Russian leader has long been known for using gifts as strategic moves.
We have no question. In fact, Melania, here you go.
Whether it's a Labrador puppy for German politician Angela Merkel, who was afraid of dogs, or a golden AK-47 to Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in 2015, or his favorite Russian-made limousine to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And now, Trump's portrait feels like good old-fashioned psychological chess. Whether or not the portrait ever makes it onto the wall of Mar-a-Lago, one thing is clear. Putin knows how to woo his audience. And if the Kremlin ever runs out of diplomatic strategies, they can always open an art gallery dedicated to world leaders with a penchant for self-worship.
That's First Post America for this Tuesday, March 25th. I'm Eric Ham, signing off from our studios here in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in.